Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on April 14th, 2016. As you can tell, I'm already smoking and smiling because I've got a whopper doozy for you today, folks. I'm just going to come right out initially and tell you I'm going to crawl all the way out to the end of the twig of high-octane speculation here and tell you that many of you are wondering what's going on with the secret meetings, the behind closed doors meetings of the Federal Reserve and all the world banks. And I do have a blog coming up about that, but just today, the story has broken. And we'll get to that story in a minute. But first of all, I want to tell you that I think these meetings, the Panama Papers, and the bearer bonds scandals from about a decade ago. You remember the Japanese guys that were caught by the Italian police crossing the border, and they had billions of dollars worth of so-called fake, listen carefully, gold-backed bearer bonds. And there have been other stories in Spain and Italy about these bearer bonds. I've talked about this story often in my books because I think it forms a crucial component of what I've been calling the hidden system of finance. So bear all this in mind. And I want to get to two articles that were just released on Zero Hedge, our friends at Zero Hedge. The first article is Deutsche Bank confirms silver market manipulation in legal settlement, agrees to expose other banks. Now stop right there. Everybody should look out for Deutsche Bank because it is also one of the banks that has a lot of those toxic derivatives on its balance sheets, and its stock has been underperforming. It's a very, very troubled bank, all right? So in addition to its other troubles, it now has this, but listen carefully to the article. Back in July of 2014, reported that in an attempt to obtain, if not compensation, then at least confirmation of bank manipulation in the precious metals industry, a group of silver bullion banks, including Deutsche Bank, Bank of Nova Scotia, and HSBC, or Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, and later the United Bank of Switzerland, and those two banks play, particularly UBS, play a huge role in the bearer bond scandals for anybody who takes the time to research them, all right? And later, United Bank of Switzerland was also added to the defendants, were all accused of manipulating prices in the multi-billion-dollar market. The lawsuit, which was originally filed in a New York district court by veteran litigator J. Scott Nicholson, a resident of Washington, D.C., alleged that the banks, which oversee the century-old silver fix, manipulated the physical and COMEX futures market since January of 2007. Now, note that date because that's 1 year before the bailouts of 2008. So what I think that means, what this market manipulation means, is that the banks saw a crisis looming on their balance sheets, particularly with the derivatives in the housing bubble that was about to break. All right. So I think this is connected also to the bailouts. Let me continue. The lawsuit subsequently received class action status. It was the first case to to target the silver fix. Skipping now a little bit down in the article, quote, "This is why we were surprised to read overnight that not only has this lawsuit against the precious metals manipulation not been swept away, but that the lead defendant, troubled German Deutsche Bank, agreed to settle the litigation over allegations that it had illegally conspired with the Bank of Nova Scotia and HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, Holdings PLC, to fix silver prices at the expense of investors." Reuters reported, citing a court case filing by the law firm Lowy. Terms were not disclosed, but the accord, listen carefully, but the accord will include a monetary payment by the German bank. It goes without saying that there would have been neither a settlement nor a payment if the banks had done nothing wrong. According to Reuters, Deutsche Bank has signed a binding settlement term sheet and is negotiating a formal settlement to be submitted for approval by U.S. District Judge Valerie Caproni, who oversees the litigation. A Deutsche Bank spokeswoman declined to comment. Lawyers for the investors did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Now, skipping down the article. In addition to valuable monetary compensation, Deutsche Bank has also agreed, listen carefully, also agreed to provide cooperation to plaintiffs, including the production of instant messages and other electronic communications as part of the settlement. In the plaintiff's estimation, the cooperation to be provided by Deutsche Bank will substantially assist plaintiffs in the prosecution of their claims against the non-settling defendants. In other words, Deutsche Bank has now turned on the rest of the big banking cartels that have been manipulating the silver bullion market. All right, now let's skip to the end of the article. Finally, this is again Zero Hedge. Finally, we'll just remind readers that the U.S. commodity regulator, the CFTC, in 2013 closed its 5-year investigation concerning allegations that the biggest bullion banks manipulate silver markets and prices. It proudly reported in September 2013 that it found no evidence of wrongdoing and dropped the probe. This is what it said, quote, "The Commodities Futures Trading Commission Division of Enforcement has closed the investigation that was publicly confirmed in September of 2008 concerning silver markets. The Division of Enforcement is not recommending the charges to the Commission in that investigation. For law enforcement and confidentiality reasons, the CFTC only rarely comments publicly on whether it has opened or closed any particular investigation. Nonetheless, given that this particular investigation was confirmed in September 2008, the CFTC deemed it appropriate to inform the public that the investigation is no longer ongoing. Based upon the law and evidence as they exist at this time, there is not a viable basis." Note they left themselves an out with that statement. "There is not a viable basis to bring an enforcement action with respect to any firm or its employees related to our investigation of silver markets," unquote. Continuing now with Zero Hedge. "In the light of this confirmation that the CFTC's probe was lacking, perhaps it is time for the so-called regulators, who at that time was headed by ex-Goldmanite Gary Gensler and assisted by revolving door expert and HFT lobby sellout Bart Chilton, to reopen its investigations." Now, Zero Hedge had no sooner posted that article than another bombshell was dropped about the Deutsche Bank settlement. And so he immediately posted a follow-up article. Let me cite this. "Deutsche Bank admits it also rigged gold prices and agrees to expose other manipulators." And let me read the significant section from this little article. "This was confirmed moments ago when Reuters reported that Deutsche Bank has also reached a settlement in U.S. litigation, alleging the bank conspired to fix gold prices. In other words, hours after admitting it was rigging the silver market, it did the same for gold." Some more headlines from Reuters. Plaintiffs reached settlement in U.S. litigation alleging it fixed gold prices. Plaintiffs' lawyers in filing say Deutsche Bank has signed a settlement term sheet. Plaintiffs' lawyers are negotiating formal settlement agreement that would be presented for judge's approval later, and so on and so forth. So now, what do I think is going on here? And like I said, I'm going to crawl way out onto the end of the twig of high-octane speculation here. Number one, I think that this is part of the reason why you saw the meetings earlier this week with President Obama and Vice President Biden both together at the U.S. Federal Reserve behind closed doors, all right? And why would the Federal Reserve be so concerned about activities of Deutsche Bank, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, and the United Bank of Switzerland? Well, let's go back and remember something that I've been insisting about: the bearer bond scandals. Those supposedly fake bearer bonds, which are gold-backed, Many of these things were somehow connected if you research the story, and the statements of account of gold on deposit were at the Union Bank of Switzerland, all right? So I've been maintaining that this is a system of hidden finance. It's part and parcel of that system of hidden finance. It got so bad, you recall, during the Japanese bearer bond scandal that President Obama, 2 weeks after its occurrence, had to announce at a press conference that the securities that were allegedly recovered were absolutely fake. They were counterfeit, all right? Now, the second thing I want to remind you of recently that's happened is the German gold repatriation effort. You recall a few years ago, Germany was attempting to repatriate its gold from the New York Federal Reserve, all right? And I pointed out at the time, and I'm going to read it again for you. I pointed out at the time that this was not the first instance in history where there seemed to be a discrepancy with German gold deposits at the New York Federal Reserve, all right? And incidentally, the bearer bonds themselves are always issued or claimed to be issued not by the U.S. Treasury, but directly by the Federal Reserve. And I've pointed out the significance of this. What this allows the U.S. government to do is denounce that these bonds represent any sort of sovereign security. What I suspect happened was that the Federal Reserve initiated or became a part of a hidden system of finance and was selling bonds on a hidden bond market directly and manipulating gold in the process. So let's turn to the German gold. Now, I've mentioned this story before, but this is an important book. This is called Confessions of the Old Wizard. This is actually the memoirs of the 1920s and 30s and early 40s Reichsbank president Hjalmar Schacht, all right? You all know that name. He was, so to speak, Hitler's banker, all right? He was a wheeler, dealer, and central banker back in that period of history. On page 245, listen to what he says. He's visiting his friend Benjamin Strong, governor of the New York Federal Reserve. Another amusing incident arose from the fact that the Reichsbank maintained a not inconsiderable gold deposit in the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Strong was proud to be able to show us the vaults, which were situated in the deepest cellar of the building, and remarked, quote, "Now, Herr Schacht, you shall see where the Reichsbank gold is kept," unquote. While the staff looked for the hiding place of the Reichsbank gold, we went through the vaults. We waited several minutes. At length we were told, quote, "Mr. Strong, we can't find the Reichsbank gold," unquote. Strong was flabbergasted, but I comforted him. Quote, "Never mind, I believe you when you say the gold is there. Even if it weren't, you are good for its replacement," unquote. Now that's Hjalmar Schacht, then president of the Reichsbank. So there's something fishy going on with gold. Now let me stop and remind you of one other crucial thing, because I think this now may be where we're getting to tax havens, the Panama Papers, the international drug trade, all right? If you've read my books, Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations in particular, where I go at length into this hidden system of finance, the relationship to the bearer bond scandals, and the drug trade, you'll recall that the term gold in that hidden system is a code word for drugs and drug money. So what do I suspect is really going on here? Why are the bankers now in closed meetings and in something of a panic? Well, number one, I think what this is demonstrating is that there's a connection between drug money laundering and the bullion markets and their suppression, all right? This, I think, is a key mechanism that may have been overlooked, all right? And with that said, I think what some of these bankers are realizing is that this hidden system of finance has become so huge that it is no longer in their control. They no longer have control over it. It's somebody else that has control over. And this again is where I think the Panama Papers are coming in, because I've been arguing that the Panama Papers weren't leaked by the Western financial elite and that they weren't leaked by Russia. I think there's a third party involved behind it, and it served everybody in the financial world notice that we know exactly what has been going on, what the account numbers are, who's been involved, and so on and so forth. So all of this, all of these stories, in my opinion, the bearer bond scandals, the drug money laundering, now this settlement with Deutsche Bank being announced, the meetings earlier this week, I think all of these things are related, all right? Just exactly how will remain to be seen, but I've already given you some suggestions. It will come out eventually that there's a connection between bullion market manipulation, the hidden world of drug money laundering, the secret world of a hidden financial system, and so on down the line. And we may even be seeing more, not just of exposure of so-called Rothschild corruption, but of other Western corruption. This is a story, in other words, I'm arguing, folks, that's all interconnected, and it's not going to go away. This is not something that you're going to see wrapped up in a tidy bow in a box by the end of the year. This is going to go on for a few years, in my opinion. So that's it for today's news and views. I told you it was a whopper doozy, folks. I'll see you on the flip side, and God bless everybody. Oh, by the way, before I stop, people have been asking me about the new book. The new book is at the warehouse at Adventures Unlimited. It should be coming out soon. I've been informed that the Common Core book should be coming out soon. So I'll keep everybody posted, but be patient if you have back orders at Adventures Unlimited or Amazon, because it's on its way. All right, vid chat tomorrow night, guys. I'll see you on the flip side, and bye-bye, and God bless.